Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When you vote, what do you think is actually happening? Not what you've been told, not what it symbolizes. What do you believe your action changes? Because for most people, voting doesn't feel like a civic duty, it feels like control. And that feeling, not the outcome, is the point. Participation feels powerful for a simple reason. It creates closure. You show up, you make your choice, and you leave believing you've done your part. Psychologically, that matters. The brain interprets participation as agency, even when the actual influence is minimal. That doesn't mean participation is fake. It means the emotional payoff often outweighs the structural impact, and systems have learned to exploit that gap. In a functioning system, participation leads to influence. Feedback loops are short, outcomes are visible, responsibility is traceable. But modern political systems don't work that way. They're large, they're slow, and they're opaque. So instead of giving people influence, they give them ritual. Voting, petitions, hashtags, protests with no legitimate follow-through. These acts feel meaningful, but they rarely alter power structures. Participation becomes the substitute for control. And here's the uncomfortable part. Systems don't fear participation. They fear coordination. One angry voter is noise. Millions of isolated participants are manageable. But organized, sustained pressure, that's dangerous. So the system encourages individual expression, symbolic action, and emotional release, and doesn't want long-term organizing, structural demands, boring, unglamorous work. Participation becomes an exhaust valve. You release frustration, and the system remains intact. We're taught to think of democracy as a series of decisive moments. Election day, the big vote, the turning point. But power doesn't operate in moments. It operates continuously. Policy is shaped between elections, in committees, by incentives, by donors, and by institutions that never appear on the ballots. Voting feels like a climax. In reality, it's usually the epilogue. And here's why most people don't notice. Participation feels good. It provides moral relief, social validation, a sense of belonging. You actually get to say something. I did something. I voted. And psychologically, that's often enough. The discomfort only appears later when nothing ever seems to change. But instead of questioning the system, people internalize the failure. They assume that the other side is the problem, the voters are stupid, and the country is broken. Rarely do they ask whether participation itself has been intentionally limited. This is important. The system doesn't lie to you by saying participation matters. Participation does matter. What's misleading is the implication that participation alone equals power. It doesn't. Participation without leverage is performance. And performance keeps people engaged without giving them any control. So here's the real function of the participation illusion. It keeps people busy, emotionally invested, and convinced that they're involved, but not structurally dangerous. You're allowed to choose between options. You're rarely allowed to question how those options were even created. That's not accidental. It's efficient. So the question isn't whether you should participate. The question is whether participation has replaced influence. Whether the act of showing up has become a stand-in for real leverage. Because feeling involved is not the same as being powerful. And once you understand that, you start asking very different questions.